Thank you very much for the introduction. And indeed, as said, today I'll attempt to demystify data mesh because it's kind of a new kid on the block, and there's still a lot of misconceptions about the topic. So I'm going to try to tackle those today. Maybe a quick introduction of myself. By nature, I'm a mathematician, yet somehow I ended up in managing data engineers. Currently, indeed, I'm a product manager at Raito, where we have the ambition to simplify managing access to data. But for this session, it's much more relevant that in a previous life, I have been responsible for the entire data engineering team of DPG Media, the largest Benelux media company. Being active in newspapers, both digital as print, magazines, television, streaming services, and much more. Next to that, I'm also an active member of the Data Mesh community. So if you want to know more, there's a large Slack community having quite a lot of discussions about data mesh. But as said, it's mostly my role within DPG Media that has attracted me to data mesh, and there the story starts 2019, also close to the first articles being published by Zhamak Dehghani, the founder of the concept of data mesh. And if you look first, what is a mesh? It's a representation of a given shape or form consisting of an arrangement of a finite set of geometric components. Why do I present this true definition of what is a mesh? Because early 2021, so close to 2 years ago, I was presenting as well about the topic of a data mesh, and I kind of was in an existential crisis of what data mesh actually means. Because if you look towards the previous years, lots have been said about the topic, but lots have been shifted as well still. And more is coming to a final format from an ID perspective, also thanks to the book being published by Zhamak Dehghani. Yet, as said, there's still a lot of misconceptions about the topic as well. So a few years ago, I was one of those still looking and figuring out what it actually meant. And that's where I went back to the true definition. So what's most important in there is that it's an arrangement of a finite set of components. So what data mesh is about a link from the data space towards domain-driven architecture or domain-driven distributed architecture. So where you try to set up the business domains you have within your technology architecture, and for data, that means you try to model your data within the domains you have within your business. You will have a sales domain, you will have a marketing domain, for example. And it's how you link those finite set of domains together that brings you to a true data mesh. For that, you need a bunch of other elements, which you see here on the slide. We would love to introduce a self-serve infrastructure as a platform, which means that people can use a single platform, a single data platform, but from a distributed point of view within usage. And that you bring product thinking to data. Data mesh probably is, for the first time, an attempt to tackle some issues within the data space from a decentralized point by default. So if you look back to the history, quite often you try to move to a central BI team, and after a while you notice that certain responsibilities shift towards the entire organization, hence decentralization happens. The same has happened again with data lakes, where again you try to collect a central data lake, but in the end you see some responsibilities shifting towards other teams within the organization. Data mesh, for the first time, is an attempt to really acknowledge the fact that data is living throughout different business domains, throughout different applications, and hence that you need a decentralized setup to to optimize certain elements. But for that to work, you need a governance system. So instead of having data governance after the facts, which has happened quite often in traditional BI or data lake projects, you now have a governance by default, a governance by design upfront up until data mesh. But as said, today I'll try to most of all tackle some common misconceptions about the topic. So let's start with what I call the fake elements. What can you hear quite often outside, but is not necessarily true. Data mesh does not imply a certain architecture. There's something about a self-serve infrastructure as a platform within the principles of data mesh, yet it doesn't tell you how that platform should look like, and it doesn't even tell you whether that platform should be truly used all the time. If you look to our journey at DPG Media, we've stated you can always use the central platform we offer. But if you want to deviate for good reasons, you're free to do so. The only thing we don't do is, as a central data team or a central platform team, we don't take responsibility for maintenance. If you want to deviate from standards from the platform, it's fine, but maintenance burden is upon you. Where do you set some strict policies is more, this is the format of data we're expecting. We're expecting it either being on a Kafka topic, either being a Parquet file on S3 or something else, a limited set of supported data formats, which then should be logged into a data catalog or another tool where you can find and truly discover the data which is available throughout the company. So there are a certain set of standards. This is what we expect. This is how you make your data discoverable. But how data gets there is not the most relevant item. There's a self-serve data platform in there, but you can deviate. That also means, as it does not imply a certain architecture, that there's no vendor that can guarantee or position themselves as the data mesh golden hammer. With our tool, you can enable a data mesh. By nature, data mesh acknowledges the distributed fact of data and also the distributed fact of technologies within the data space. In the end, it doesn't really matter whether your data lives in Snowflake, on BigQuery, in Redshift, or other data warehousing technologies, or maybe file systems, S3, blob storage, and so on. As long as you allow it on a single place. So there's no vendor that can state, we as a sole solution bring you a complete solution that will cover your data mesh journey. They're all trying to tackle quite a bunch of elements of the story, but it's the distributed nature that truly conflicts with vendors stating that they're a purely data mesh solution. Another misconception I've heard already quite a while, and if it's not an architecture, then it must be a data modeling technique. And again, one has nothing to do with the other. A data mesh consists of a bunch of data products, all coming from one or more domains within your organization, and every domain itself can choose their data modeling technique. For example, your sales domain can offer a star schema, whereas your marketing domain can offer a data mart, and yet another domain can offer a data vault. There's not really an implication on what should be out there. What data mesh tries to enable is that you can link data across all those domains so that it becomes interoperable. So that IDs known within the sales domain are enclosed as well within the marketing domain, so that you can make sure that you can link both of them together. So no real impact on data modeling, free upon your choice. What we, however, noticed is that throughout the journey of data, you have data products which are much closer to the source systems, source-oriented data products, which most often describe a single business entity. You will, for example, end up with a data product. These are our customers, these are our consumers, these are our products. There, of course, typical data marts or even data vault setup might be more relevant than trying to model that within in a star schema, but there's not really a restriction upon it. Whereas more closer to the end consumer, maybe a star schema again becomes more relevant than, for example, a data vault setup. But that's more throughout the journey of data and not really data mesh implying something. Then another one, data mesh implies a certain organizational structure. As said, data mesh for the first time has the ambition to, from starters, have a decentralized setup on tackling certain data issues. That means that you should enable all business domains to work with their data. And then people are stating that means that you will shift data engineers towards your domain teams, creating multifunctional or cross-functional teams. That's definitely a relevant solution to the issue, and that's exactly what we did in DPG Media in a company of 7,000 employees, of 70 data people. Later on, I've also been CTO of a smaller sports event organizer, 300 people, a data team of 3 people. The same organizational structure does not make sense in such a company. It doesn't make sense to decentralize or split up a team of 3 because you get really isolated teams. Splitting up and pushing data engineers of 70 data engineers in the organization might make sense because you can still keep smaller data engineering teams having backups of people. So how you solve certain of the data mesh principles within your organization is more organization specific than truly coming from data mesh. Yet if you look to architecture, if you look to data modeling techniques, and if you look to organizational structure, I always tell, towards my opinion, data mesh will most often have the largest impact on your organizational structure. I argue that with whichever technology you use, whichever architecture you try to enforce, you can implement quite a lot of principles of data mesh, and you're completely free of choice with regards to your data model, yet it will impact your organizational structure as you really try to bind data knowledge, your data engineer, together with business knowledge, subject matter experts within your business domains. I've already told a few times that data mesh is probably the first attempt on really focusing on a decentralization by nature from the start. That does, however, not mean that you decentralize all responsibilities. As said, already the self-serve data platform is something which probably will be offered by a platform team, a team which from a responsibility side you keep centrally. And this, what we did as well at DPG Media was making sure that data governance, or at least defining your data governance requirements, was kept centrally, and making sure that you can govern those. Certain elements like making sure that your data is available in a catalog and that it has qualitative metadata are responsible, or the responsibilities of a data owner. But defining that you what you require is definitely something that you could define centrally. And then a final thing, if moving towards self-serve, the self-serve data mesh, a self-serve infrastructure as a platform, that might imply the end of the data engineer. You're trying to push more and more responsibilities in your business teams. That does, however, not mean that you do not need data engineering no longer. Again, what we tried to enable within DPG Media was pushing data engineering capabilities towards business teams, coming up with cross-functional teams. But we've acknowledged that you still need some data engineering, even next to purely the data platform. So what we did was we've tried, and that's something you see quite often, people are trying to lower the technical barrier. For example, enabling people with DBT to get SQL in a software engineering best practice environment. And more your data analysts can as well create data products that are reusable by the rest of the company. But there are certain elements where truly technical data engineers are very valuable in defining your data pipelines. Certainly from a FinOps and a DevOps perspective, so managing costs, managing software engineering best practices, but also for more complex transformations. More personal opinion, I don't see truly no-code platforms really supporting the entire data mesh setup. Again, it's more a personal opinion, but I do believe that bringing software engineering best practices via coding tools, or at least a certain amount of coding and flexibility, will always be living. I'm quickly looking to the Q&A before I'll move to the next part of the presentation. So reading one of the questions that's already out there, acknowledging the distributed nature of data, are there tools for data discovery? This is especially concerning for open source data resources collected by different groups like governments. Are there recommendations like having master data catalogs with consistent metadata requirements? For me, it's a combination of two questions. Are there tools for data discovery? Yes, of course. And then you're indeed looking more to the typical data catalogs, where you can go from Rolls Royces like Colibra or Monte Carlo up until closer to open source like DataHub and Alation, where you again are in charge in defining what metadata you really require, but as well, where does it coming from? Having more the software engineering approach from my point of view, I do believe that a bunch of those metadata can come from code or from your databases. So tagging data in Snowflake or S3, or adding labels via DBT, rather than really having some manual input along the way within your data catalog itself. But there's definitely a bunch of solutions out there which can work fine in your environment. Then if you look to more open source data resources collected by different groups like governments, there it's more up until the team that is really gathering the data together. So if you look to Belgium, I'm from Belgium, there's an initiative from the government offering open data towards the community. It's more in a typical catalog format indeed, but it also allows you to download and interact with the data, whereas a catalog within your environment will probably contain the link to where the data lives, but does not offer you access from the catalog itself towards your data, or at least not more than a sample. So there are certain distinctions there. And going back to the presentation, a few more about what I do believe are more facts about data and no longer or about data mesh and no longer the misconceptions. As already said before, data mesh is mostly a paradigm shift with an impact on mindset and organization. No impact or small impact on architecture, most often from a functionality point of view. You want to enable this data discoverability, not necessarily impact on your data model, yet an impact on your organization as you try to bring people together, and then impact on the mindset to allow your business domains to take ownership about their data. So that's what it really tries to enable, placing ownership in the correct place. By doing so, it also has the ambition to remove the bottleneck of a central data team. So what you quite often see in larger organizations with a central data team is that they're suffering with the tremendous amount of requests they are having. Feature requests, data access requests, data quality being pushed within that team. So there's a bunch on their roadmap, and the technical landscape as well is shifting rapidly throughout the years as well. So keeping up is already a hard job, and making sure that you can be proficient more yourself with your data is making sure that you can take the ownership and that you can take data in your own hands. And by doing so, you're removing that bottleneck of your central data team, because in the end, what it is the most important element of data mesh is that you try to place ownership where it truly belongs. And I'm going to give data quality. I'm going to use data quality as an example. What we've seen in the past is that quite often the responsibility of data quality is placed in your central data team by, first of all, providing dashboards about quality, and secondly of all, during transformations, trying to clean up your data. Yet, if you look where data quality issues are residing from, there are two main elements that are responsible for data quality issues. That's the input of data, garbage in, garbage out. So if your inputted data is incorrect, then of course throughout the entire data pipeline afterwards, the quality of your data is low. And by nature, that should be the responsibility of the one introducing the data, so the data domain itself. That's also something that has been attempted by having central data quality reports. But if you look to the second place where data quality issues are introduced, that's most often in the transformations, because there are misinterpretations about what the data really means. I always told within TPG Media, a company of 7,000 employees, having marketing, advertising, sales, print, digital platforms and stuff like that. We had 33 data engineers. You cannot expect those 33 data engineers to understand all those business domains where you have 7,000 people working for it, where you have an IT team of 600 people delivering IT systems. So you need to guide them, you need to tell them what data means, and not expect that your data team truly understands all your data. And by doing so, rather than cleaning up data, they quite often introduced data quality issues as well within the pipeline. And there again, if you can place ownership of data to the actual domain team where data is created, where data is captured for the first time, which probably also best known the source system where data resides. they should be able to tell what data actually means, and by doing so improve the quality of your data. Maybe to give an example from DPG Media, if you look to personalized push messages we had, so we've pushed an app notification to users based on their preferences. From the moment on, we've increased quality of metadata of news articles by placing ownership more upstream in the organization, more downstream, apologies. So really at the source teams, the open rate with the same algorithms increased by a factor of 5. So the quality of data by placing it really early in the organization improved machine learning algorithms, data science algorithms output as well. Then to finalize, and then there's at least already one more question in Q&A, so don't run. But to finalize, I think this is also a good wrap up as well. Next to the decentralized element of the data mesh, data should also be considered as a product and not as a byproduct of an application. So by placing ownership early in the stream and making sure that those people really see data as their asset, and making them responsible to open up a data as a product and no longer open up the application they're using, you increase quality, you increase trust in the data, you increase the overview of what is being used for which purposes. So this product thinking towards data is very relevant within the data mesh setup. Then there's one more question already in the Q&A. What are some determining factors to implement between data mesh and data fabric? Fair to say I'm not the data fabric expert, maybe not even the data mesh expert. But where I see the largest differences is that data fabric is more technology focused. So it will most often have a larger impact on the technology you're using and the architecture, whereas data mesh more starts from the ownership and pushing the ownership towards domains, and by doing so probably will have an impact as well, but they're coming from a different point of view. Data fabric tries to resolve certain issues from a technology point of view, where data mesh will probably have a larger impact on the organization. One more question. What are the main milestones for a mature organization on its journey towards implementing data mesh? As always, I would say don't go all the way from day one. So I'm mostly going to refer to our story at DPG Media. Where we've started to implement data mesh principles within a few domains. We've started off with 3 domains, making sure that they can offer data products which can be reused throughout the organization, and as well having large impact on themselves as well, by the way. So I think that's a good first step, making sure that you can enable some of the domains with data product thinking and ownership. Then from those first domains, you can learn what the impact will be on your technology, because governing a few domains isn't that hard. You can do this mostly by having meetings, yet if you go full blown, you'll need more governance, and that will be different from most of the companies. So learning from those first domains what you require definitely from a governance perspective to roll out in the entire organization can be done at that moment, and then you will mature your self-serve data platform as well as start defining governance policies. So I think that's a second important one. And then maybe before really rolling out, having an end-to-end chain from data products, maybe in only a few domains, might benefit you as well, because typically you'll start with source-oriented data products. This is a customer because these are all our customers coming from SAP or a different system. These are all our orders and so on. Yet if you look to the entire chain up until your data science models, probably there are 2 or 3 stages of data products in between. So having a first end-to-end story where, for example, your sales department offers data products which are converted by your marketing department in other data products, which are then used for data science models for acquisition. Can be very relevant. So I think those are good milestones. Rolling out in a few, learning from governance perspective, and reshaping your platform, really going end to end towards going full blown within your organization.